There are rooms where certain things should never be said, not because the words are illegal, not because they're scandalous in any headline-grabbing way, but because of what they reveal about the person saying them, and because of who is standing close enough to hear. This was one of those rooms, a Windsor Castle reception. Flowers, champagne, soft music, an evening designed specifically to honor Princess Anne, her 20th royal engagement, 50 years of unglamorous, relentless, quietly extraordinary service to the crown. And in the middle of it all, in a cluster of guests near the side of the room, Camilla's daughter Laura Lopes said something that stopped the conversation cold. She said Anne's approach to duty was out of touch with modern Britain, that the younger royals brought fresher energy, that Anne essentially belonged to another era. At Anne's own celebration, the words drifted across the room, and William heard them. What happened in the seconds after that is a story about loyalty, the kind that bypasses diplomacy and composure and every carefully cultivated instinct to keep the peace. It's a story about what this blended family actually looks like when the cameras aren't running and nobody is performing unity for a public that wants to believe in it. And it's a story about Princess Anne, who heard the comment too, said nothing, tightened her lips slightly, and kept going. Because that is what she always does. What this evening was supposed to be. To understand why the comment landed so hard, you need to understand what the evening actually meant. 20,000 royal engagements. That number is almost impossible to hold in your mind. It represents decades of early mornings and late evenings, of showing up to hospitals and community centers and military bases and charity dinners in places that never make the front page. It represents over 300 charitable organizations, a workload that makes every other working royal look, as one observer put it, like they're on a part-time schedule. Anne has never chased headlines. She has never cultivated a personal brand or hired a team to manage her image or given carefully staged interviews designed to generate warmth. She shows up, does the work, and goes home, year after year, decade after decade, with a consistency that is almost unreasonable in its steadiness. This evening was supposed to be a celebration of exactly that. William was there because he genuinely admires her, has since he was a child. He has said privately that he considers her a model for how to carry royal responsibility without losing yourself in the weight of it. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there because he wanted to be. And then Laura Lopes opened her mouth. Laura is Camilla's daughter from her first marriage. She's an art curator, a mother of 3, someone who has spent her adult life building a real career outside the palace, which is genuinely admirable. She was invited that evening by her mother. Families show up for each other. That's normal. But at some point during the evening, standing in a small group near the edge of the room, she said it. Anne's view of duty was old-fashioned, out of touch with modern Britain. The younger royals, William, Catherine, brought something fresher. Anne belonged to another era. On paper, you could almost argue this is just an observation about generational differences. People say things like this at dinner parties all the time. But this wasn't a dinner party. This was a room full of people who had gathered specifically to honor 50 years of the exact thing Laura had just called irrelevant. And here is the thing that makes the context cut so deeply. Laura benefits from this institution. Her mother is queen consort because of the Mons. Archie Anne has spent her life protecting the stability Laura has enjoyed, the access, the proximity, the quiet privileges of being connected to the crown, rests on a foundation that people like Anne built, brick by unglamorous brick. To stand in a room celebrating that foundation and suggest the builder was out of touch at her own celebration is not just rude. It is a specific kind of blindness that reveals something about what you think you deserve and where you think it came from. What Anne did. Anne heard it. People who know her well can always tell, even when her face shows nothing, the slight tightening at the corners of her lips, a small shift in posture, almost imperceptible to anyone who hadn't spent years watching her absorb things she was never going to acknowledge. She has been dismissed before, underestimated, overshadowed by brothers who generated more headlines, questioned about her choices, dismissed as the less glamorous sibling in a family that had no shortage of glamour to offer. She has faced all of it with the same composure she brought to that room. But hearing it here, in a space that was supposed to be hers, from someone connected to the family by marriage, sat differently. Not because it was the harshest thing she had ever heard, because of the specific shape of the disrespect, the assumption that her approach could simply be waved away as belonging to another era, as though the era had been wrong and the person dismissing it had found something better. She said nothing. She redirected the nearby group toward her charity work, toward stories from her early trips with Save the Children, toward the actual purpose of the evening. She diffused the moment with the efficient grace of someone who has been doing this for decades. She did not give Laura the reaction Laura may not have even known she was risking. She just kept going. William's instincts don't always follow his training. He has spent years learning to keep his feelings managed in public, to smile through tension, to maintain composure when something has landed wrong, to be diplomatic when every part of him wants to be direct. He is usually very good at this, but his loyalty to the people he loves runs underneath all of that, deeper than the training reaches, and Anne has always been one of those people. He had watched her work for years while others generated headlines. He had watched her defend this institution through genuinely dark periods, through Diana's death and the chaos surrounding it, through scandal after scandal, through every moment that threatened to pull the family apart. He had watched her never once complain publicly, never once position herself for sympathy, never once ask for credit she had more than earned. When he heard Laura's words, something in him bypassed every diplomatic instinct he possessed. His fists clenched. He took steps toward her. The room felt it before anyone understood what was happening. Champagne glasses left untouched. Conversations that stopped mid-sentence. A collective intake of breath as guests registered the change in the temperature of the room. William didn't raise his voice. He didn't cause a scene in the way that would have made the evening's news. But the silence that followed Laura's comment, charged with everything William wasn't saying out loud, was louder than shouting would have been. Everyone in that room understood. He was not going to pretend this hadn't happened. The morning after. He couldn't sleep. The anger hadn't cooled. If anything, it had sharpened into something more specific through the night. A clarity about what exactly had been said, what it meant, and why he wasn't willing to let it dissolve into the polite amnesia that royal gatherings usually rely on. He asked to speak with Anne privately the next morning. She met him in her sitting room at Gatcombe Park. She was calm, as she always is. She listened. He told her he couldn't understand it. That someone who had never carried the weight of this institution, who benefited from it without bearing any of its obligations, had stood in a room full of people honoring her and called her irrelevant. Anne looked at him with the particular patience of someone who has been getting this treatment for 50 years. She told him, "You get used to it, that people always think they know what this job should look like." That Laura's comment was just another dismissal from someone who didn't truly understand what the work was. William listened, and then he pushed back. He reminded her of everything she had given up, the missed holidays, the endless engagements in places that never made the news, the grinding daily commitment to something most people only notice when it's absent. He told her that absorbing this quietly was not the right answer, that letting it pass would dishonor the very thing the evening had been meant to celebrate. Anne heard him. She appreciated it. She told him to hold back. He couldn't. The tension didn't explode. It settled. Like cold air moving into a room slowly enough that you don't notice the temperature dropping until you're already uncomfortable. William began to pull back from Camilla. Subtly. Not dramatically. Conversations shortened. Joint appearances that could be avoided were avoided. The particular warmth that polite necessity sometimes produces between people who share a family. That warmth cooled. Seasoned courtiers noticed. People who spend their working lives reading the temperature of rooms that the public never sees. Then came the charity gala at Clarence House. Laura was there. The art world is her territory, and she moved through it confidently, at ease, laughing with guests. When William entered with Catherine, something shifted in the room. He kept his distance from Laura. His face showed nothing that could be called warmth. When they ended up face to face, a moment that was always going to arrive at some point in an evening that small. The greeting was brief and stiff. Laura responded with a touch of defiance. She clearly felt the entire situation had been blown far beyond what it deserved. From where she stood, she had made an observation at a party. She hadn't attacked anyone, she hadn't intended harm, and now she was being treated as though she'd committed something serious, summoned into a tension she hadn't meant to create. That gap between what she thought she'd done and what William believed she'd done was the part that couldn't be bridged. Camilla guided Laura away from the exchange with a practiced smile that didn't quite hide the frustration underneath it. The room at Buckingham Palace. Charles called the meeting because he could see the gap widening and he needed to at least try. A small drawing room, away from the grand state chambers. William, Anne, Camilla, Laura, Catherine. Uneasy silence before Charles even spoke. He opened by saying what kings say when their families are fracturing in front of them, that unity was their greatest strength, that even small private disagreements could shake public confidence if they leaked, that he needed them to find a way through this together. William spoke first. He was clear and he was firm, and he meant every word. Anne had given 50 years to the crown. What had been said at her own celebration had crossed a line. He wasn't asking for drama, he was asking for acknowledgement. Laura didn't back down. She said she hadn't meant to offend anyone, that she'd spoken casually, that the reaction had genuinely surprised her. From her perspective, she had made an observation and suddenly found herself at the center of a family intervention. Anne stepped in, as she always does. She acknowledged that the comment had stung. She asked everyone to avoid escalating further. Her voice was steady. It is always steady. Camilla's frustration was visible by the time she spoke. Her children had deliberately kept their distance from palace politics precisely to avoid this kind of scrutiny. Laura had built a career of her own, outside the formal structure. Dragging her into this felt, to Camilla, profoundly unfair. William had an answer for that, and it was the one that nobody in the room could comfortably dismiss. You don't get to claim outsider status when it's convenient while also standing in the room. If you're in the family, your words carry weight. That's not a rule that comes with a title. It's just how this works. The meeting ended without resolution. Charles encouraged reconciliation. Anne left quietly, already thinking about her next engagement. William left unsatisfied. Laura and Camilla left defensive. The building around them was one of the most magnificent in the world. The conversation inside it solved nothing at all. Two ways of understanding duty. Here is what this story is really about. It was never truly about one comment at one party. Comments like Laura's don't fracture families all by themselves. They fracture families because of everything they land on. All the unspoken tensions and unresolved questions that have been sitting quietly beneath the surface, waiting for exactly this kind of moment. William's fury was about more than his aunt's feelings. It was about a set of values, duty, consistency, sacrifice, that he believes the monarchy's survival depends on. He watched Anne embody those values his entire life. Hearing them dismissed, in a room built to honor them, by someone who had never been asked to carry them, was not something he could absorb and move past. Laura's defiance was about more than stubbornness. It was about a different understanding of what the monarchy should look like. More modern, more flexible, less anchored to a version of royal duty that can seem, from the outside, like an act of willful erasure. Neither perspective is entirely wrong, but they cannot easily coexist. And in a family where everything is weighted with history and hierarchy and the particular pressure of living inside an institution the public needs to believe in, casual observations are not casual. Words land differently when the floor beneath you is made of centuries. What Anne carried home. The cameras didn't catch any of this. The public saw smiles and coordinated appearances and the managed face of a family that understands its responsibility to project stability. But Catherine told friends later that Anne had seemed more burdened than usual that evening. Not broken, not undone, just carrying something extra, the weight of an unwanted conflict that had attached itself to a night that was supposed to be a celebration. Anne went home and kept working. That's what she always does. She had an engagement the next morning, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. Her 300th charity, her 20,000th engagement, and whatever comes next. She carries it forward the way she has always carried everything. Steadily, quietly, without asking whether anyone is watching or whether it matters or whether someone somewhere thinks it belongs to another era. She has always known something that is very hard to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. This kind of service isn't about being admired. It isn't about being modern or relevant or generating the right kind of energy for a contemporary audience. It's just about showing up again and again and again, without stopping. No public apology came, no dramatic resolution, no moment where the two perspectives found each other and agreed. Just a family that went quiet again, the way families do when something true has been said and nobody is quite ready to deal with it yet. William stayed close to Anne. Laura stayed in too. He art world. Camilla stayed protective. Charles stayed in the middle, and Anne kept working. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think William was right to push back this hard, or was Laura's comment just an honest observation that got blown out of proportion? Drop your take in the comments. This is exactly the kind of story where different people see it completely differently, and I genuinely want to know where you land.